Good morning. I'm speaking with Dr. Ron Fry of the Department of Organizational Behavior at Case Western Reserve University. Good morning, Dr. Fry.
Hi.
Hi. What I'd like to talk to you about is to collect some of the stories about your work, not only in the field of organization behavior, but also at Case Western Reserve. The faculty, both current and emeriti, have done seminal and significant work in the field, and we would like to hear about your experiences doing that. And we'd like to start by asking you, how did you end up in the field and how did you end up at Case?
That's a great story, actually. I think I was an engineer, and I worked for a short stint in aerospace engineering with Hughes Aircraft in Southern California. And I didn't like my job. I didn't know why. I looked around and I felt, or appeared to me, that the managers and supervisors seemed to have more interesting work and seemed to be more lively. So the advice was to go get the equivalent of an MBA and then come back and get in the supervisory track instead of the technical track. So I ended up at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Their version of an MBA was called a Master of Science in Management. And I had to take an introductory course in what was essentially human behavior or organizational behavior. And like most students coming into an MBA program, I tried to waive out of some of the required courses so that I could take more electives and be better positioned for the market. So of all the courses, the only one that I thought I even had a remote chance of waiving was this human behavior class or leadership class. So I went to meet the professor and explained my case, and he sort of smiled and listened, and then he said, it's 2 weeks until the drop ad period. Why don't you just come to the first 4 classes, and if you don't want to take the course after that, so I'll waive you. That professor was David Kolb, and so after 4 classes, I was hooked, and I didn't know why, but I just was. I became a TA for David in his experiential learning. He was pioneering this experiential learning textbook for the topic of organization psychology. And of course, as I got to know him, he was involved with Ed Schein and Dick Beckard and other thought leaders in the emerging field of organization development. And he took me into the field with him. And so I just started morphing into this thing called organization psychology. And then when the time came near of graduating and thinking about going back to aerospace engineering, I was much more interested in doing what they were doing, the faculty there. So then the path to that was to get a PhD. So I stayed at the Sloan School and got my PhD. I had this, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was just this golden opportunity to be a student of Ed Schein, Dick Beckard. Warren Bennis was visiting professor. We could take doctoral seminars also at Harvard, so Lawrence and Lorsch and Chris Argyris. I got exposed to all these sort of first generation OD writers and thinkers. So by the time I was into the PhD program, I was pretty hooked. And I discovered I enjoyed teaching, and I got reasonably good feedback on that. And then during that time of getting my doctorate, David Kolb left the Sloan School and came to Case Western Reserve. So when the time came for me to graduate and look into the market, David said, well, you ought to check this place out. And the thing that I most wanted to do at that time was to work with doctoral students the way they had worked with me. And Case Western Reserve had started the first PhD program in organizational behavior, and they had the largest doctoral group. At that time, it was they were taking 8 or 10 a year, and so there were 30 some odd or more active doctoral students. So it was a very vibrant community, a lot of engagement between the faculty and the students. So I was fortunate to get selected, invited to come here. So I kind of followed David Kolb. And then as I was interviewing and learning about, they had just begun the year before 2 years before I arrived. Eric Nielsen had written a white paper and launched this thing called the Masters in OD, which was also a first. So CASE is the home of the first doctoral program in organization behavior, and then the first master's program in organization development. So it was a great fit. I mean, I felt like I was just kind of continuing my life from MIT to here, just switching from doctoral student to a young assistant professor.
You talked a little bit about what drew you here. Reflecting back on your career at CASE, you've done some very impactful work, some life-changing work for many organizations and people. What are you most proud of?
Well, I'm most proud of the most current, which would be, I think, being a co-creator of the appreciative inquiry theory and method. That's been the last 20 years of work, and so I think there's other things before that, but that's what occupies my passion today. So being with Suresh Srivastava, who was our department chairman, and I was a young assistant professor, and then David Cooperrider, Frank Barrett, Jim Ludum, a number of others were doctoral students coming through in those early years. And then, of course, David, Suresh, and I think, became like a kind of a core of what emerged as appreciative inquiry. And I think the redesign or the rethinking of the Masters in OD to become the Masters in Positive OD, which I led that part in 2004. So the influence of appreciative inquiry into education and professional development, I'm very proud of. And then, of course, the work and the expanding global community of practice is just amazing. And the fact that in our global conferences now, which we have approximately every 3 years, there's well over 40 countries represented. There's 500 to 700 people registering and attending. It clearly has gotten traction as a practice worldwide. So I think that's very exciting. And before that, when I first came, I was doing a lot of work with teams, team development, team building, executive teams, and the particular innovation that actually began in my doctoral student work at MIT carried over here in the first, I would say, 5 to 10 years at CASE, had to do with task-oriented team development. So that task-oriented approach was a unique, different twist on the OD way of working with teams, and that I attribute a lot to Dick Beckard as my mentor at MIT. He had been working on a task-focused way of helping teams to improve their effectiveness. And we discovered kind of a hierarchical relationship between issues related to goals, roles, procedures, and relationships. And it kind of turned the OD approach at that time a little bit upside down, because most OD practitioners were seen as heavily focused on relationship first. And our work in the field and the writing we did then was more, it's in service of the reason the team was put together, which was some kind of interdependent task. So I'm still proud of that work, and I think that made a contribution to the OD practice at the time. The other thing that has stayed with me from working with Dave Kolb back at MIT as a student has been the application of experiential learning to learning programs, learning environments. So I've helped to design not just the MPOD, but our executive MBA program. I was part of the founding group that established our Center for Nonprofit Management here at the university. And all those are sort of, what's similar in there is the application of different learning styles to program design. How do you tap into the strengths of a reflective learner versus an abstract or an active or a concrete learner in the actual design of programs? So
You've as you've articulated, you've done work that's impacted probably thousands of people around the world. People are using your models to this day, and very effectively doing that. What was it about CASE particularly that allowed you to do groundbreaking work? What do you value about this organization, particularly the department, that's allowed you to be as successful as you've been?
it kind of relates to the whole experiential learning. Starting point for me, I think, was what I found here was a climate or a culture of, we talk a lot about this in the MPOD or the former MOD program, the not separating the personal from the professional, that particularly in organization development as a change agent or a facilitator or enabler of change, it's not just knowing things and tools and applying them. It's being in relationship. And so whether it's our doctoral students or our master's students, this idea that personal growth and development is not separate from, it's the same, not the same, but it's part of, personal is part of professional and vice versa. So that has always, I think, been a core value here. And so the result of that is I just think there's more attention and more willingness to create a learning environment that's mutually engaging. Yes, faculty have roles and they're different from students, but it's still, there's more of a shared learning objective, I think. As a professor, you learn from the students that find you. I mean, doctoral students, master's students, those are the high points of your life, I think. Publications are nice, but it's like, for me, the passion to continue comes from students that you find along the way, or they find us, and then they enrich your lives. So.
I'm going to talk a little bit now about the field, organizational behavior, however you define that, broadly, narrowly. We know that building on the best of what we've done in the past helps us move forward, but the other side of that is articulating our dreams and hopes of the future. Go hand in hand with that. And reflecting on the field, what are your hopes for the future of the field, and what do you feel is the most important thing we need to be mindful of as the field grows and changes?
my hopes for the field are that we continue and speed up the direction of addressing or embracing the societal level issues. That we're not just to help organizations in the traditional sense be the best they can be, but that we leverage organizations and other institutions, we help leverage them for greater good. There's a lot of creativity and innovation going on in coaching and in one-on-one and small group continues. Small group has always been a focus of OD, but I think the whole field of coaching is full of innovation and is well established. The larger focus, multi-institutional, multi-organizational, supply chains, that I think is still a opportunity, challenge, and very necessary. We just have larger issues and challenges that no organization or even single industry is going to, or government is going to be able to, I think, make a positive difference without intersection between public, private, civil, business, all those different sectors. So that's my hope, is that there's movement in that direction. Some of it here in our Fowler Center for Business as an Agent for World Benefit. Small role, but we're starting. We're trying to pioneer some things in that direction. So I would hope that the field continues to grow in that domain. Yeah. I think this latest, it's not a trend, it's the idea of dialogic OD is, I think AI was certainly one of the first examples of that, and preceded the most recent book by one of our doctoral alumni, Jervis Bush. I think that's a very appropriate and kind of exciting direction. And for me, it opens up a doorway to connect with complexity theory, which I'm finding today is just fitting my understanding and my experience of organizations or organizing so nicely. And so I see a blending or an intersection there that is calling for innovative thought and new thinking, OD and complexity.
And finally, how would you like to be remembered? How would you like your work to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a good mentor, and a person that was able to help people learn and help people move in the direction of their best selves, and collectively as well. That organizations or larger groupings felt the same way about my skills and my strengths. I think I'm a good collaborator and understand groups effectively. I think my understanding of groups and group dynamics has been helpful, and that I have been gifted by already having former students or former clients remember me in very nice ways related to that.
Thank you. We've been talking with
Thank you.
Dr. Ron Fry this morning. Thank you so much.